The life of Josephine Baker is a rags to riches story of a musical icon, stage sensation and heroine of the French Resistance who took 20th century Europe by storm. She was born Frida Josephine MacDonald in St. Louis, Missouri on June 3, 1906. At the age of 11, she and her mother were two of the 6,000 black residents who were driven out of East St. Louis after an anti-black riot that spanned 2 days, July 2nd and 3rd, 1917. White rioters burned black residents' homes, lynched people, and killed with abandon. As she fled with her mother across the Eads Bridge, she witnessed one of her father's friends shot in the face and saw pregnant women disemboweled. Josephine grew up cleaning houses and babysitting for wealthy white families who reminded her, "Be sure not to kiss the baby." She got a job waitressing at the Old Chauffeurs Club in St. Louis. While waiting tables, she met and had a brief marriage to Willie Wells when she was 13 years old. She was married and divorced 3 more times. To American Willie Baker in 1921, whose last name she chose to keep. To Frenchman Jean Léon in 1937, from whom she attained French citizenship. And to French orchestra leader Jo Bouillon in 1947, who helped to raise her 12 adopted children. She toured the United States with the Jones Family Band and the Dixie Steppers in 1919, performing various comical skits. When the troupe split, she tried to advance as a chorus girl for the Dixie Steppers in Cecil and Blake's production Shuffle Along. She was rejected because she was too skinny and too dark. Undeterred, she learned the chorus lines routines while working as a dresser. She was the obvious replacement when the dancer left. On stage, she rolled her eyes and purposely acted clumsy. The audience loved her comedic touch, and Josephine was a box office draw for the rest of the show's run. Josephine flourished as a dancer in several vaudeville shows, which was a popular theatre genre in the early 20th century. She eventually moved to New York City and participated in the celebration of black life and art, now known as the Harlem Renaissance. A few years later, her success took her to Paris. She won over Paris in La Revue Negre, a musical and dance extravaganza where she upended sexual stereotypes with uninhibited, often frenzied dance performances that emphasized the beauty and power of a black body. Baker performed her Danse Sauvage to a rapturous audience that sold out night after night. She quickly became one of the city's most beloved performers, known as the Bronze Venus, the Black Pearl, and the Creole Goddess. When the Revue Negre closed, Josephine starred in La Folie de Jour at the Folies Bergère Theatre. Her jaw-dropping performance, including a costume of 16 bananas strung into a skirt, cemented her celebrity status. Josephine rivaled Gloria Swanson and Mary Pickford, probably the biggest female movie stars in Hollywood in the 1920s, as the most photographed woman in the world, and by 1927, she earned more than any entertainer in Europe. She starred in 2 movies in the early 1930s, Zuzu, where she became the first woman to play the leading role in a major motion picture, and Princess Tam Tam. She moved her family from St. Louis to Les Milandes, her estate in France, which is now a tourist attraction, with each of the main rooms illustrating a different aspect of Josephine Baker's life, with a mix of costumes, posters, photographs, documents and artifacts. And in the background, always the voice of Josephine Baker singing the songs that made her a star. She had a pet cheetah named Chiquita, who she took for walks on the streets of Paris. Other pets included dogs, cats, fish, parrots, a chimpanzee, a parakeet, a snake, a pig named Albert and a goat named Tutu. A 1936 return to the United States to star in the Ziegfeld Follies proved disastrous, even though she was a major celebrity in Europe. American audiences rejected the idea of a black woman with so much sophistication and power. Newspaper reviews were equally cruel. The New York Times called her a Negro wench. She returned to Europe heartbroken. During World War II, she served France in several ways. She performed for the troops. was an honourable correspondent for the French Resistance. Undercover work included smuggling secret messages written on her music sheets. And she became a sub-lieutenant in the Women's Auxiliary Air Force. In October 1942, Baker was reported dead in Portugal. But while gravely ill, she was still very much alive, albeit in Morocco. In 1941, she had travelled to North Africa, where she faced serious complications from an emergency hysterectomy. She recovered in a private clinic in Casablanca, all the while using her convalescent bed as a rendezvous point for members of the French Resistance. When she heard the news of her untimely death, she reportedly replied, "I'm much too busy to die." After the war, she received several honours. She became a Chevalier of the Legion of Honour. She received the Croix de Guerre, the Medal of the Resistance with Rosette, and the Commemorative Medal for Voluntary Service in Free France. In 1951, she was invited back to the United States to perform in a Miami nightclub. There, Baker launched the latest iteration of her career as a civil rights activist. Refusing to put up with racial segregation, she launched a public relations campaign that succeeded in desegregating the club's audience. Success in desegregating her audiences transformed her into an early icon of the civil rights movement that was just beginning to gather steam in the early 1950s. Following her Miami gig, she launched a national tour that stood in stark contrast to her 1936 Broadway experience. Instead of derision and scorn, this time around she had sold-out shows, was greeted by enthusiastic audiences, and received rave reviews. It culminated with a parade in Harlem attended by over 100,000 people in honour of her receiving the 1951 National Association for the Advancement of Coloured People Woman of the Year Award. When New York's popular Stoke Club refused her service, she engaged in a head-on media battle with pro-segregation columnist Walter Winchell. She was accused by Winchell of being a communist and was put on an FBI watch list which restricted her movements in and out of the USA. She wasn't able to return to the United States until 1963. When she did, she spoke along with Martin Luther King at the 1963 Civil Rights March on Washington, which is famous for Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech. The NAACP named May 20th Josephine Baker Day in honour of her efforts. It was also during this time that she began adopting children, forming a family she referred to as the Rainbow Tribe. Josephine wanted to prove that children of different ethnicities and religions could still be brothers. She often took the children with her cross country, and when they were at Les Mélandes, tours were arranged so visitors could walk the grounds and see how natural and happy the children in the Rainbow Tribe were. Josephine agreed to perform at New York Carnegie Hall in 1973. Due to previous experience, she was nervous about how the audience and critics would receive her. This time, however, cultural and racial growth was evident. Josephine received a standing ovation before the concert even began. The enthusiastic welcome was so touching that she wept on stage. On April the 8th, 1975, Josephine premiered at the Bobino Theatre in Paris. Celebrities such as Princess Grace of Monaco, Sophia Loren, Diana Ross, Liza Minnelli and Mick Jagger were in attendance to see the 68-year-old Josephine perform a medley of routines from her 50-year career. The reviews were among her best ever. Days later, however, Josephine died from a cerebral hemorrhage on April the 12th, surrounded by reviews of her latest performances. More than 20,000 people crowded the streets of Paris to watch the funeral procession on its way to the Church of the Madeleine. The French government honoured her with an honour guard and a 21-gun salute, making Josephine Baker the first and only American woman buried in France with full military honours. To its great men, the grateful homeland, is the inscription at the entrance of the Pantheon in Paris, a magnificent mausoleum honouring many heroes of French history, including Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Victor Hugo and Voltaire. Only 6 of them are women though, including scientist Marie Curie and politician Simone Weil. The 6th one was Josephine Baker. In 2021, she became the first black woman to be inducted into the French Pantheon, the hallowed tomb of heroes. President Emmanuel Macron's address at the ceremony immortalised her in French history when he said, "You are entering this pantheon because, although you were born American, there is no one more French than you."